Hey, welcome back to our weekly roundup. My name is Frankie.
And I'm Ryan from the Coffee Break.
Yeah, and this show will not be possible without the support from the Coffee Break.
Coffee Break is a newsletter that summarizes local, global business news and just to have sort of like an easy summary for people to read. Yes, it is free, absolutely. You just have to subscribe with the link below and get smarter.
Okay, cool. And today we have very interesting topics to talk about. Now, I noticed last week the stock market was not doing very well, mainly because one of the Magnificent Seven stock got into a little bit of trouble. But we will go into that later. But the point that I want to make is that while the stock market is not doing very well, there's another asset class that did superbly well. And I'm talking about Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin finally hit all-time high again, I think on Tuesday, right?
Yes, on Tuesday.
And it managed to hit $69,200.
Yeah, so this was after about 2 years, 2 years and a few months,
2 years.
because the last all-time high was back in November 2021, right? And that didn't sustain. But I think what we're seeing now is the prices are sustaining at the 60,000 level. The biggest contributor is probably the announcement of ETFs.
Yes, the announcement of ETFs, correct. And that have resulted in a lot of new inflows of new capital into this asset class.
Correct.
Now, what happened is that when a lot of people buy Bitcoin ETFs, the fund managers will need to take the money and buy ETF and put into the fund.
The physical asset.
The physical asset to put into the fund.
But it's not physical. Cryptocurrency is not physical,
It
right?
is digital, right? Yeah. Because if they don't do that, then the whole ETF will just be empty and it will have become a scam, right? So fund managers cannot do that. They'll have to take the money and buy new Bitcoins to put into it.
So the ETFs has been launched for a couple of months now. Right?
About 2 months, I think.
Since about January. So let's talk about their performance, right? So BlackRock's iShares Bitcoin ETF is currently the biggest. I think asset management is about 12 billion. And the next in line is actually Fidelity at about 7.2 billion, right? So it's been 2 months, but the AUM has just grown within the past 2 months, right? Because I think there's so much interest in cryptocurrency over the last decade or so.
Yes.
Right. I think now finally people get an avenue to legally have a share or investment in this. I think that's why it's also driving the big inflows. And on Tuesday, as the price hit all-time high, of course, when it hit all-time high, it didn't last there. It dropped. I think it dropped at about 10%, right? Very usual. And BlackRock gobbled up almost up to $1 billion, 778 million worth of Bitcoin on Tuesday as the fund's investors bought the dip.
BTD bought the dip. So that's the crazy part of all these Bitcoin ETFs, right? Every day you're talking about more than $500 million worth of new funds flowing into it. You haven't talked about the usual investors who buy Bitcoin directly, This is just ETF alone. So the demand is just crazy right now.
If you were into the cryptocurrency space, you would have known Michael Saylor. Right, Michael Saylor and his
MicroStrategy.
Right? So he has been stacking Bitcoin over the years. He would take out loans. He would, I think, sell his shares and whatnot. He would do a lot of corporate exercises just to buy Bitcoin. Not even investing in his own company, but just to buy Bitcoin. So over the time, I think he's amassed close to about 200,000 Bitcoins, right? About 183,000. BlackRock, 2 months' time, 183,000.
Whoa. Are they the largest holders now?
I think they are the largest holder.
Well, to the point that MicroStrategy actually changed their business direction to be Bitcoin profit-centric.
And it has been, I think, since 2020, 2019. I think it's been a while. It's not like a recent thing. They have had the strategy for a while now. If you follow Michael Sayer's Twitter, you would have seen he would, as and when he would announce, people would be like, wow. Then he also shows his average price, which I last recall is about 51,000. So the Bitcoin stack he has now is really up about 23%?
That's great, right? But as an investor, I'm not sure whether that is something that you want to invest in as a proper business stock because it doesn't really have a business. The business is to buy Bitcoin. Then why don't you buy Bitcoin yourself or just buy the ETF? So to put it in another way, right? Maybe you can see MicroStrategy as one of
a proxy
to the Bitcoin price.
And I think its share price also moved.
Crazy. It has performed much better than the Magnificent Seven recently. Yeah, every day can go up 10-20%.
Mainly because of its holdings in Bitcoin.
Correct.
But it's not sustainable, right? I mean, that's what I feel like. How much can Bitcoin price grow at this point? Now it already hit all-time high. Usually when it hit all-time high, it would continue to surpass. And I think usually if you look at technical in stock markets, based on my limited knowledge, is that once it hit all-time high, because it's resistance, right? Continue to break. But not in the case of Bitcoin. Because I think one of the reasons also, like some of these old miners, right? So based on report by Coinbase, about 1,000 Bitcoins worth roughly about 69 million. Although it doesn't move the market much because Bitcoin is about 1 trillion now. The
market cap
has breached 1 trillion, right? But about 1,000 Bitcoin were moved to Coinbase, and the research firm says that these are linked to miners. So this 1,000 Bitcoins were actually from miners who were like held it for the longest time and want to cash out lah.
Yeah, because usually when people move their crypto assets into an exchange, it's an indicator that they are ready to sell to make profit. So maybe this is an early indication that people are starting to take some profit.
Fair enough lah, fair enough, right? To reap some benefit after all the times they have hold. Because it's not easy being a cryptocurrency asset class owner because you get to ride the wave. And I think from my experience, limited experience investing in crypto is that, wow, you've seen it goes up. Right, 2021. Did I sell? I didn't sell. Why don't you see it go down to like 20,000, 15,000? I also didn't sell, right? It's really a roller coaster. And I think it builds somewhat of a resilience. So now it hit 69,000. Do I feel anything? Okay, I'm a bit happy, but just sharing memes with each other.
Yeah, but just now we mentioned about MicroStrategy that changed their whole business direction into owning Bitcoin as one of the main business. If you recall, right, when Bitcoin last hit its all-time high, 69,000 back in 2021, one company actually talked a lot about Bitcoin, and they even talk about their customers can use Bitcoin to make transactions. Can you remember this company? No?
Why not you all take a guess and let us know?
Yeah, I give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so this company is Tesla. Right? It's not surprising, but a lot of people have already forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, as Bitcoin price came down and then some people just got fed up with it, then they just put that aside. So I just want to bring back some history about the relationship between Tesla and Bitcoin. So Elon Musk was one of the biggest crypto enthusiasts at that point in time. I think now still, right?
It depends, man. It really depends. At one point, he was talking about Doge and Doge.
Yeah,
like Dogecoin flew,
correct.
like Shiba. Then you had like replicas like Shiba coming up, and it flew. And then I think at one point, because Dogecoin is really a meme coin.
Yes.
Really, like, just go and find out what a meme coin is. And he was talking about it on Twitter and all that. He was an N2 lah.
N2,
okay? He was an N2.
Yeah, but what happened is that at the last round of all-time high of 69,000, I think Tesla did one wrong move. They thought it's going to go up even higher. They put in $1.5 billion to buy up Bitcoin. And subsequently, of course, it didn't turn out very well. So this happened in February 2021. And then when Bitcoin started to drop, or maybe they want to take profit, I don't know, right? So they started to take a little bit of profit. They sold 4,320 Bitcoins in March 2021, which is right after 1 month after they bought 1.5 billion worth. But subsequently, in 2022, we all know that crypto winter came, and everyone thought that Bitcoin is going to crash and it's going to worth nothing. At that point, it became a stretch to Tesla's balance sheet as well. It got them into a little bit of trouble, and people thought that maybe Tesla might go bust. And in order to sustain their cash flow, Tesla had no choice, but they sold most of their Bitcoin holdings. They sold close to 29,200 Bitcoins at that time. Almost everything already. And what was left was 9,720 Bitcoin on their balance sheet.
Still quite substantial.
Still quite substantial, but in contrast, it's very big.
Yeah.
From over 30,000, you become like 9,000.
Yeah, and in terms of Tesla, I mean, it's pocket change for them probably.
But since then, since 2022, until recently, it has not changed. They still remain at 9,720 Bitcoin. But it's becoming a discussion recently because somebody went to check Tesla's balance sheet and they noticed that the holdings of Bitcoin in Tesla has gone up. So from 9,720, recently it has gone up to 11,500. That's 1,700 Bitcoin more than before. Now the question is, would all this old news start to come up again?
Again, would drive up the...
Yeah, maybe Elon Musk may come on and say that, okay, now this is the time where you can use Bitcoin to buy my Tesla cars, or I don't know, he may come out with some radical comments again, right?
Yeah. I mean, Elon Musk loves the attention. So this is perfect. I mean, also seen what happened with OpenAI. The drama with OpenAI over the last week,
Yes,
right? The whole
yes.
the open letters and call it close AI even, I thought it was quite funny. He made a comment about, oh yeah, you're going to be a for-profit, you must call yourself a close AI. So there were lawsuits and all that, but that is Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's Elon Musk. But nonetheless, in terms of the share price of Tesla, it is not doing very well lah. Year to date, it fell close to 30%. I think that's mainly because number one, they keep lowering their price, so maybe the margin was hit. And number two, today, as we mentioned before in our previous weekly roundup, there are more and more competition of EV coming to the market. I think that has dampened their sales quite a bit.
I think on top of that, right, I think the EV trend has also slowed down a little. Not only Tesla, I think you look at in the US, I think I've seen graphs of like cars like Rivian. Rivian is US. I think Polestar, Lucid, all also have lost tremendous value since their all-time highs. Right? I think it's just the hype is slowing down, and maybe it's also a bit pricier to buy an electric car compared to your conventional ICE cars, right?
So just now at the beginning, I mentioned that there's one stock that caused the whole market to become a bit lackluster.
One of the Magnificent Seven.
One of the Magnificent Seven. And this stock is Apple. Apple being the heaviest weightage on the S&P 500 index. If I'm not mistaken, is about 8.5 or close to 9% weightage on the S&P 500. What it means is the entire S&P 500 companies, where it has 500 companies, right? But Apple itself, the weightage is close to 9% due to the market cap of the stock, right? So what happened is that if Apple stocks move up or down, it's going to impact the index by a fair bit, simply because it is very heavy on the index. And recently, Apple is not in the good spot in the European Union and also in China.
Apple has not been in Europe's good books in a long while, so
Correct.
they also shifted from the USB-C.
Yes.
So they had their Lightning, which is like the most Apple thing to do lah. You have a port that is not compatible with any other device. You have a Lightning port, which is
That's their DNA, right? When they make something, it's only for the Apple ecosystem.
Correct.
Right? It's never for everyone else to use.
when they had the iPhone 14. They had not iPhone 14, iPhone 4. Then they had the long pin. Remember the big pin? I think the 30 pin adapter to charge your phone. 4S,
yeah.
Right, the long, the rectangular. Then
Yes,
iPhone 5 they had the Lightning.
Yes.
It lasts for a while. It lasts for about 10 generations. Up to until iPhone 14, you still have to use a Lightning cable. Then last year, and I think it's also under pressure from EU to then launch. You have to change your to your USB-C. Otherwise, you cannot sell your phones here.
Correct.
So that was the first slap on the wrist right? Which Apple adhered to. And the second one is the latest, right? How much were they fined?
Oh, they were fined $2 billion, man. And what got them into trouble is actually the music streaming business. As usual, Apple being Apple, if you want to listen to music, you must use iTunes.
Now it's Apple Music lah.
Yeah, now it's Apple
Music.
Music.
Actually, the iTunes model was a very interesting model because they were selling songs. One song for 99 cents. And it was a very successful model, right?
But the thing about Europe is that they don't like this kind of
anti-competition.
Anti-competition. For the longest time, they have been eyeing on this kind of companies. So I think previously Microsoft also got into a bit of trouble. Google also same as well. Google for sure. And this time around, they got their eyes on Apple. Yeah, and because Spotify went to file a complaint against Apple to say that, hey, why you only allow Apple Music to be published on the Apple ecosystem? That's not fair. So they opened a file on Apple, and finally they decided to fine Apple about $2 billion.
Of course, Spotify is from Europe right? And it was also about how Apple's ecosystem, right? If you were to pay in the Apple ecosystem, they take a 30% charge.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they take a 30% charge on if you buy something, let's say you subscribe Spotify on Apple's ecosystem and you subscribe to App Store or whatever, they take a 30% charge.
Oh.
Whereas if I pay on web, let's say I pay $10 to Spotify on web, right? And I pay on an Apple iPhone takes a 30% charge.
Oh, I didn't know that. So it's cheaper to subscribe on the website and then you log into your...
It would have been the same price.
Okay.
But Spotify wouldn't get the 30%.
I see.
So that was the reason why it triggered this hefty fine from Okay, not so hefty for a $2.6 trillion company, but it's still a big fine, right?
It's still a big fine. So this thing came about because the European Union has this new act called the Digital Markets Act. Essentially what it does is that it becomes illegal for certain platforms to favor their own services over their rivals. So in this case, it's between Apple Music and Spotify lah. Okay, so under this new act, right, Digital Markets Act, apparently if you are found guilty, they have the rights to fine you up to 10% of your total revenue. Total revenue.
Okay.
And we all know that Apple's biggest business doesn't come from Apple Music.
Yep.
It's from the sales of iPhone.
Yep.
So if they violate this Digital Markets Act, right, they are not penalizing you on the music business alone, but they penalize you on the entire Apple's revenue, of which they have made close to $120 billion in the first quarter itself. Yeah, and out of the $120 billion, close to $70 billion come from iPhone sales. So buta kena fine. That is one of the key reasons why when people heard about the news, everyone started to sell Apple shares.
But it's also a very Apple thing to do, right?
Yeah.
They've also had their fights with, I think it was a game developer in the US where they implement the same thing,
Yeah,
And
but they probably need to change their business model going forward, because if they don't do that, right, if they repeat this kind of practice in the future, the fine is not 10% anymore, it will be 20% of their total revenue.
Oh, that's going to be double.
That's going to be double.
Easily double. 2 billion is really just a slap on the wrist. It's less than 10%, because if you're talking about 120 billion in one quarter, let's do the math. For a year, it's going to be about 400 billion. 10% is going to be 40 billion.
Yes,
right?
But if they repeat this,
it's going to be 80 billion.
You're going to be 20% off, on your revenue. That will definitely affect Apple's valuation. So this is like, you do, you die, you don't do, so you don't die kind of situation. Because if you repeat the same mistake again, they are going to fine you 20% of your total revenue, right? But if you do it, then you are opening up your ecosystem to your rivals to come and compete with you. For sure, your revenue is also going to be affected. Now, it comes down to whether the effect is going to be more than 20%. Right? Think about it. Yeah. But that's not the only reason why Apple got into trouble and then their share price came down. The other issues that they are facing is the stiff competition in China.
Used to be one of the biggest markets.
One of the biggest markets. And you remember the Chinese government banned government officials from using iPhone, right? So they can only use Android phones. And because of that, it definitely dampened the sales. And on top of that, on the consumer sales itself, it also dropped by 24% in the first 6 weeks of the year. 24%.
So from iPhone, all the iPhone 15 sales didn't really fly right? Despite the USB-C changes and all that, it just didn't fly
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised because I think if you look at phones over the past few years, the improvement is very minimal. The incremental improvements, right, is very negligible one.
Yeah, everything looks the same.
Everything's the same. The design is more or less the same. The shape is more or less the same.
Yeah.
You don't feel much of a difference from an iPhone 13 to an iPhone 15, right? Unless you really want to upgrade lah. And of course, I think in China also there's a resurgence from Huawei.
Oh.
Right. So Huawei launched the Mate 60 smartphone, and it's under pressure from that because Huawei itself, I think the smartphone shipments rose 64% year-on-year in the first 6 weeks of 2024.
That is the best performing smartphone brand in China.
So one man's poison, another man's meat lah.
Oh. So it is a zero-sum game, right?
Correct. And iPhones aren't cheap. The latest model of iPhone starts at 5,999 yuan. Whereas a Mate 60 starts at about 5,499 yuan.
That gives the opportunity to Huawei to actually increase their price closer to Apple and still not look expensive.
Correct. And at the same time giving more features, right?
Correct.
So 120Hz screen, your display rates, those are quite standard on Android smartphones. Even the lower range, right, so we get 120Hz. But for Apple iPhone 15, only the Pro models get it. And the Pro is another step up in pricing. So your iPhone sales are sort of stagnant. So they're also trying to pivot into this augmented reality Apple Vision Pro, which I've just launched about sometime last month, or about in the US. They've launched it in the US. They have not launched it worldwide yet, right? And famous Apple analyst Ming-Chi Kuo actually claimed that Apple has sold about close to 200,000, 160,000 to 180,000 worth of Vision Pro units during the pre-order weekend for the device. So Apple is expected to sell about 500,000 Vision Pro sets, right? We've seen reviews, like we've seen famous YouTubers have gone in and said like they love it. And the first time they've used it, they are like blown away by it, right?
Mind blown.
We've also seen forums and news websites claiming that, yeah, it's a bit heavy on the head, right? There are also hairline cracks on the screen. And of course, a lot of users say like the use case is relatively limited. No one really want to spend more than an iPhone. Like it's more than an iPhone, it's more than a Mac on a VR device.
But I can see the potential. Let's say they can make it lighter, they put in more apps inside.
Correct.
In the future, right, you don't need to buy monitor screens. You don't need to buy keyboards or whatever. You just put the thing on and you can put like 7-8 screens in front of you.
Yeah. Keyboards you still need.
Keyboards still need.
Because I saw the reviews when they type on the keyboard, it's very slow. It's not like you can type, you know how you can type multiple fingers, right?
Yes.
But there, on the Vision Pro at least, you type one by one. If you motion, it's type one by one. The other thing is you look at the keyboard on the screen and you look at the character and you move and you type.
Okay.
That's so far how it's being done. Like, at least I've seen from the reviews, like you type one by one or you type or you tap. Look at that character.
Then probably a keyboard makes more sense.
But they probably need to scale down some of the things like, you know, the front screen. Is that really useful? Not really. It looks cool. It looks cool for sure, but is it really useful? Not really. Because a VR device is more likely being used by yourself in a room, by your own. Not so much of interacting with people, not the use case again. Depends. Still remains to be seen lah. I guess that's all we have for the news today.
Thank you for watching. If you like to listen it in a podcast format, we are also on Spotify, so go and check out the weekly roundup by the FAQ show. Okay, and see you guys again next week.
See ya. Ciao.